Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and we are officially in a recession, which sounds rather silly to say because, as a matter of fact, the last recession never ended. I shouldn't say the last recession, that was 2020. I mean, the last recession never ended. Going back to 2008, it was just papered over. It was manipulated. It was propped up. It was all funny money nonsense. But officially speaking, a recession is 2 negative quarters of GDP, and guess what? We're now in 2 negative quarters of GDP. So by official standards, we are 100% in a recession, and the news is essentially quiet on this. As this out of the Gateway Pundit says, Biden economy, recession no longer on the way. It's here. U.S. GDP down 7 months in a row. October 2021 was the last high. That is 2 quarters, my friends. Some might even add a third one in there regarding like the fact the last high was in October 2021. We are in a recession. There's no doubt about it. We also see this developing. Atlanta Fed announces GDP for second quarter at minus 2.1. Confirms U.S. economy under Joe Biden is facing a recession. And it's minus 2.1 if you're lucky. Those are already extremely propped up and manipulated numbers to begin with. And the inflation rate is much worse than they say it is. It's much higher than 8.6%. And they're pushing for another rate hike, which will likely happen possibly in the coming days, coming weeks for sure. This is something that is, I've been saying for a long time, a controlled collapse. And the purpose of this is to shift from one empire into another empire, another global empire, and bring in the Great Reset. So today we're going to go into this and more because it's facing every single one of you out there. It is basically a gun pointed at every single person. They're control collapsing this thing, my friends. They knew if with all this manipulation, they can prop up people as debt slaves for a while, but eventually push comes to shove. So they need to blame it on the right people, blame it on Russia, blame it on the war in Ukraine. They can blame it on, oh my goodness, right-wing extremists or whatever they want to do. Point is, they will blame it on whatever they can. Oh, the pandemic did it. No, you guys are the ones that printed 25% of money all ever created in the United States in like a couple months. So that's on you guys. But of course, this is a plot to push us into this crisis mode where everyone becomes dependent on the social credit technocratic grid with the collapse of the supply chain, inflation, recession, collapse of stock market, and an attack on cryptocurrencies as an alternative to get out of the dollar. And of course, with the BRICS countries now forming an even greater alliance with Saudi Arabia, this is going to get crazy, my friends. We're going to get into this and more today, but as always, make sure to check the links below, gogetfunding.com, Patreon, subscribe to our. We have a PayPal address, we have a Bitcoin address, and we have a Cointree link with multiple different cryptocurrencies that you could donate in. If you please, we truly appreciate everyone who has helped support us in the last several days. We are about to go overseas and report on a bunch of crazy stuff on the ground. We're the only ones doing it. Also, check out heavensharvest.com for heirloom seeds and non-GMO survival food. My friends, not doing this is to your own. Well, obviously, we know what will happen if you can't get things off the shelves. You're going to end up starving. It is extremely important that people go and get survival foods, heirloom seeds, water filtration, storage, gardening resources, survival resources, all on heavensharvest.com. And you could use code WAM, that's WAM, and get free shipping in the United States. Even if you're outside of the United States, I urge you to go and do that. Also, check out whamsurvival.com for long-term storable foods. You save a bunch of money if you go through us. 25-year shelf life. And again, this is in the face of the controlled collapse of the supply chain and the Great Reset, my friends. There will be no mercy when we are faced with empty store shelves. And look what they're doing in the Netherlands right now and elsewhere. Just absolutely sickening. Also, for those really concerned about your money, and I don't blame you, I think everyone should be very concerned if they have made any sort of savings over the years and their money's in a financial institution, of course. You might want to get it out of there, but check out our free consultation, the free consultation and free portfolio review with Tim Pachote, the Liberty Advisor, thelibertyadvisor.com. We have a bit.ly link in the description to book him. You could become a client at Tim Pachote at thelibertyadvisor.com and click on the bit.ly link to schedule a free consultation with him. He's a certified financial planner and one of the only red-pilled financial planners out there who's been calling out this great reset and inflationary shock for a very long time. Anyways, let's get into this. So as we now see 2 negative quarters of GDP, boom, we are in the official recession scenario, though I would say we haven't left a recession in a long time, but it's just going to be more apparent because there's going to be, it'll be harder to manipulate out of. Of course, it also requires banks to be insolvent for there to be a recession. And banks have been insolvent for a very long time. The cash deposit ratio at most major banking institutions is under 1%. That means less than 1% of your money is covered with actual cash. It's all on loan, and it's debt. It's fake. You can't even take out large chunks of money right now for most major banks. There's bank runs in China. That's just the beginning of what we're going to see here. And at the same time, the depositor insurance is around 3.5%, which means you can only get 3.5% of your money back if they do a bail-in, which they have in legislation now, where they can just pull money out of your bank account to pay off their own debts. Rather than a bailout where they take taxpayer money, et cetera. So that is extremely dangerous. And people like Mario Draghi is now the president in Italy, who used to be the head of the ECB, the European Central Bank, had once said he wanted to get rid of depositor insurance. This is evil, my friends. This is a push to complete complacency via technocracy. It'll push people into a position where if they cannot access their money and they cannot utilize their money and their money has no value, they are essentially screwed. There's nothing you can really do unless you plan for it ahead of time, like now. Another reason to check out thelibertyadvisor.com. And again, the Atlanta Fed announces GDP for second quarter at minus 2.1. Confirms U.S. economy under Joe Biden is facing a recession. Now, as much as I can't stand the old fool, the pedophile, the disgusting kid sniffer Joe Biden and his crack addicted son, who takes videos of children nude, as much as I can't stand those people, it's not Biden's fault that there's a recession, though there's a lot of policies that aid this. It's a Federal Reserve. It always is. It's not the presidents have very little say over this. Now, obviously, shutting down manufacturing plants and stopping shipping of things is definitely adding to the problem dramatically and more what's happening with the supply chain. But as for the recession, I blame the Federal Reserve. They're this monolithic, disgusting organization that uses puppet strings on every president. But it says they didn't make any headlines for some reason. The Atlanta Federal Reserve announced on Friday that the second quarter of 2022 saw a GDP of minus 2.1%. Breitbart.com reported the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta's GDP Now economy tracker plunged even deeper into negative territory on Friday, falling from minus 1% to minus 2.1% for nearly 2 weeks prior to this week. The tracker had shown zero growth. The Atlanta Fed reported on Friday, recent forecasts for the GDP Now model are available and more extensive numerical details, including underlying source data, forecasts, and model parameters are available as a separate spreadsheet. You can also view an archive of recent commentaries from GDP Now estimates. Please note, we no longer support the GDP Now app and blah, blah, blah. And that's their basic announcement. And then they said, and this is from July 1st, which no one's reporting on. The GDP Now model estimates for real GDP growth, seasonally adjusted annual rate in the second quarter of 2022 is negative 2.1% on July 1st, down from negative 1% on June 30th. After this morning's manufacturing ISM report on business from the Institute for Supply Management and the construction report from the U.S. Census Bureau, the nowcasts of second quarter real personal consumption expenditures growth and real gross private domestic investment growth decreased from 1.7% and negative 13.2% respectively to 0.8% and negative 15.2% respectively. And the next update is on the 7th, which is tomorrow. The GDP shrank by 1.6% in the first quarter of 2022. And as we reported previously, the U.S. GDP is now on a downturn and has been down, with the last all-time high being in October of 2021. That is now more than 6 months ago. We have been warning about this since I have been talking about this since 2006, but at WHAM since 2013. And people just said, oh, Chicken Little. No, we're just talking about basic economics 101. This is what happens at the end of the day. If you print a bunch of currency and you throw a bunch of bonds and then enter the stock market and manipulate things and at the same time destroy small businesses, destroy competition in the markets, prop up giant corporations. But those corporations also are spending more in many cases than they're making, and then they're getting bailed out, and they're getting all these grants from the government, and the GDP ends up collapsing. And the whole idea is that push came to shove, eventually this was going to collapse, and now they're purposely pushing into the BRICS country order and the IMF's SDR, which I believe will be the major replacement with social credit, carbon credits, and vaccine passes, etc., tied to a cashless world currency, SDR. And that means eventually when housing crashes too, and which it is right now, and when the supply chain completely breaks down, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. They'll give you free houses, they'll give you food rations, and all tied to your social credit system on a digital currency that is not cash. That is a plan, my friends. This is at a zero hedge. Crude crashes, yield curve inverts, bonds and the dollar surge. So the dollar is weirdly, it's going up currently, but versus other currencies, it's a race to the bottom. And the ruble is doing much better, actually, but it's a race to the bottom. And so it's kind of crazy because it just looks like everyone's suffering. It makes it look like the economy is doing good. It's not doing good. It's obviously they're going for broke. There's going to be a crack up boom, and we're going to see a massive collapse into the Great Reset, exactly as planned. Meanwhile, Fed Chair Jerome Powell says U.S. economy is in strong shape as economy drops into recession. Wow. Last week, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell told reporters that the current inflation rate was unpredictable. Only the elites and the experts like Jerome Powell did not see the inflation train coming down the tracks. Wall Street Silver wrote on Twitter, Jerome Powell, I think we now understand better how little we understand about inflation. Host, that's not very reassuring. Jerome, this was unpredicted. Only the experts in the media didn't see this coming, just about everyone else did. Absolutely. We've been warning about it forever. And the notion that it was the same thing with recently at the European Central Bank and at the IMF. They're like, yeah, these are the unintended consequences. And then Janet Yellen, who's now the Treasury Secretary, who used to be the chair of the Federal Reserve, was like, oh yeah, well, I guess we just didn't understand how bad inflation could get. These are unintended consequences. Really? Unintended? Also, if you study inflation your whole life, how do you not know that printing 25% of all the currency ever in circulation in 1 year is going to cause inflation? That's like the most basic thing you could possibly think of. Inflation took off immediately after Joe Biden was sworn in and never stopped. That's what happens when Democrats spend like drunk socialists. Look, again, screw the Democrats, bunch of satanic pedophiles. But again, this has been a long time coming. This goes back 100 years, first of all, and then specifically in the last 51 years to Nixon getting us off the gold standard and going into the fiat currency system. And I mean, we could go down to the 1024 AD, the Sung Dynasty creating paper currency with IOUs. But anyway, point is, last 50 years specifically, this has been an issue. And since the days of Volcker, going into Greenspan and Bernanke and Yellen and now Powell. I mean, regardless of who's in power, I mean, obviously the Democrats spend more, but let's not forget that the largest printing of currency in history in the United States happened under Trump in 2020. Oh, because of the pandemic. Yeah, the fake pandemic. Great. And by the way, Trump put in Jerome Powell, this establishment shill, who everyone knew was an establishment shill for a long time before he was put in. So basically Trump put in this hardcore Keynesian into the Federal Reserve years after saying that he was against the Fed. And then he, of course, attacked Jerome Powell, but wanted him to devalue the currency more. So let's not grasp at straws here. The reality is that Trump wasn't very helpful to any of this himself. But obviously, when it comes to Democrats, more tyrannical and more spending and all that kind of stuff. Yes. But if we're going to play the left-right paradigm, we should call out both sides equally in this case, because this currency printing is equally done by both sides. Earlier today, Jerome Powell said the economy is in strong shape during testimony. I mean, this is crazy. Remember, everything these guys say, do the opposite. I'll give you an example. Here's an article from Janet Yellen, who was the chair of the Fed at the time. On June 27th, 2017, she says, I don't see a financial crisis occurring in our lifetimes. The Fed chair said on Tuesday, said the country's financial sector is very much stronger than it was years ago. And then she got a urinary tract infection, acted crazy, and did a bunch of crazy stuff that barely made the news. And everyone just conveniently forgets about it. But when you see people like Jerome Powell say the economy is in strong shape, don't forget that not only did Janet Yellen say this 5 years ago, look what she just said less than a month ago, June 9th of 2022. Nothing to suggest U.S. will have a recession, according to Yellen. What? Are you like, you got to be beyond crazy. Nothing to suggest collapse of supply chain, collapse of stock market, banks insolvent, 2 negative quarters of GDP. Nothing to suggest the gas prices are skyrocketing. They're shutting down all the exporting, importing. There's war. There's a push to new countries as new world reserve currencies away from the dollar as the U.S. empire crumbles, and they teach the military how to be gender inclusive and respect trans people, while the Russian military is waking up and doing like 1,000 push-ups a day. Oh yeah. Yeah, nothing to suggest the end of an empire, nothing to suggest a recession, nothing to suggest it. Like these people, again, do the opposite of what they say. Another reason, again, to go check out Tim Picciott, the Liberty Advisor, the libertyadvisorshow.com, the libertyadvisor.com, and the bit.ly link in the description to get a free portfolio review. Seriously, guys, get on this. This is so dangerous, so dangerous. Let's just look at these parallels. Nothing to suggest the U.S. will have a recession. June 9th, 2022. And then this one. Recession is no longer on the way. It's here. U.S. GDP down 7 months in a row. October 2021 was the last high. And that's July 5th, 2022. Funny how much less than a month makes. Much of a difference. It's incredible. Though most of us saw coming long ago. And I believe that this is a controlled collapse into a great reset scenario where everyone's desperate, on their knees, begging for help. If you shove someone down a bottomless pit of debt, they're forced to ask for a ladder up from the government or the banking system to get back on their feet. This is a goal. And in this case, it won't just be your regular banks. This will be international. This will be an international collapse, because if the US dollar goes down, it will just see domino effect happening throughout the world. And we'll see a new order form. And that is something they've been wanting to do for a long time. This is why the U.S. Stopped Japan from overthrowing the Chinese government in World War II. It's all been planned for a very long time. And FDR armed and funded Ho Chi Minh and all that kind of stuff in Vietnam. And then fast forward to Henry Kissinger meeting with Mao Zedong in the early 1970s to create an artificial alliance with China to create export-import hub and monopoly for them during their starvation event. And then Mao died, but shortly after, this collaboration turned into the creation of the Trilateral Commission by Zbigniew Brzezinski during the Carter administration. And the Trilateral Commission was to create a global technocratic superstate based on cashless digital technology, essentially, though it wasn't called digital then. It was like some kind of electric cash of some kind, so that they could just have numbers on a computer. And that way, then they could create a technocratic superstate based in social credit, based in what they've now been using China as a guinea pig state for so long to do. Now, China, again, everything that happens there will eventually happen everywhere else if we don't fight. China is now having bank runs, but they have social credit, and you can't protest because of the COVID pass. Oh, there's COVID. You can't go outside and protest. Your money all being robbed from you and you not being able to feed your family, because then you're not part of the collective. You're not part of the effort to make things good for everyone, like this old collectivist mantra of the greater good of the greater number, as they say, quote unquote. And we've saw it in Stalinist Russia. We've seen it in communist China for a long time. We've seen it in Cuba. We've seen it in so many places around the world. Push came to shove. We are about to see a Venezuela situation, not as intense as it was in Venezuela, because we're going to be shifting into new currencies probably a bit faster, because the whole global order is on our side, unfortunately. But it'll be a shift into those who don't have good social credit will not be able to use the mainstream banking currency system, the SDR, etc. You'll be stuck with your inflated currency, or you'll be forced to trade in gold or silver or privacy coins like Monero, Epic Cash, things like that, or Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is traceable, so I wouldn't suggest that as a solution to this, though it is better than having the dollar, generally speaking, over time. Zoom out. But the point is, we are entering into the biggest collapse in world history. It's here. We're already in it. People are just kidding themselves at this point to try and convince themselves that everything's going to be all right. It's not going to just be all right. Eventually it will be. Good overcomes evil, but this is going into the Great Reset. This is going into Agenda 2030. They're going to bring in food rations. That's why Bill Gates is buying up all of these, all this farmland, and on top of that, buying up warehouses and farmland in North Dakota next to military bases, with the Chinese government is also buying up huge plots of land next to these military bases. They're going to be flying us and training us in, and or putting us in our Teslas and locking the bulletproof doors and driving us remotely to whatever gulag we have to go to. They already have food rations that with the recent, not recent, September 2021, they brought in the Emergency Planning Act in Canada for Section 18 and 18.1, which allows them to do food rations, take your house, take your property, kill you if they want, arrest you without warrant, force you to work without pay, etc. This is already planned. Amazon's buying up all this land and all these warehouses. They're burning down all these places to cause a control collapse of the supply chain, all while the economy collapses, gas prices go up. There are ways out of this, but you have to be prepared, and you have to actually take that upon yourself. I can't make anyone do anything. I could try and push people over the edge so they actually go and do something about this now, not later when everything's falling over. You can't go, oh, the Tower of Babel's falling. Let me try and patch up a brick with some gum. My friends, you have to go out and do things now to survive in the future. It's expensive to get storeable foods, but it's better than, dying and starving or being part of the warring factions that are to come. So as I always say, heavensharvest.com, use code WHAM and get heirloom seeds. You got non-GMO storable foods, long-term storable foods, water filtration, water pumps, all that kind of stuff. Lots of gardening and survival resources, fire starters, etc. There's also whamsurvival.com for long-term storable foods. Again, use code WHAM at heavensharvest.com and go to whamsurvival.com and get long-term storable foods. You save a bunch of money if you go through us. It doesn't make sense not to do this. I know people are like, oh, you're mentioning this stuff too much. It drives me crazy. Yeah, well, I want people to actually be able to survive this. I want the viewers out there, the strongest intellectual people out there, to survive this, because your smarts, as far as being awake, won't mean anything if you can't feed yourself. And if you have no financial stability at all. So again, check out the bit.ly link for Tim Pachote's thelibertyadvisor.com and book Tim P. I think the bit.ly link says in the description of this video. Get on it now, my friends. We're going to have guests coming up in the coming week on the subject of gold and silver, and also mining stocks, which are interesting. And I've gone into that quite a few times before, because I mean, in a collapse scenario, who's bringing the rock out of the ground? It makes a difference. And of course, we have a lot more coming up, and we have a new correspondent coming on with us. You've seen him probably in a few of our videos before, Adam N. Williams, 9/11 survivor he was in the financial sector. We've interviewed him in Mexico. We've interviewed him in the Netherlands several times, and he's a really good guy. He's going to be doing videos for us. He's competes in bodybuilding competitions in Europe and is one of the top guys out there for that. He's now in Florida, and he's going to be doing some great videos for us. So I'm looking forward to that. So stay tuned for those videos, just in case someone's like, oh, where did this guy come from? Well, I want to give everyone a heads up. We got people coming on, and we are expanding greatly. So we're also heading over to Europe right away again, to get a bunch of reports done on the ground. And so if you have stories throughout Europe and the Middle East and places like that, let us know. We are happy to do our best to try and get out there and be the only ones reporting on these subjects like we were in 2020 and 2021. Anyway, I appreciate everyone watching today. Make sure to check those links below. GoGetFunding.com, Patreon, subscribe to our PayPal. We have a Bitcoin address, and we have a Cointree link with multiple different cryptocurrencies that you could donate in if you please, if you want to help support us in this journey to getting the truth out and mobilizing people. Because at the end of the day, we have to live by example. We have to live freely. We have to get out of this technocracy. We need to get out of the social credit system. We need to reject the Chinese style tyranny, because of course tyranny comes under the guise of convenience, and when everything collapses, everyone goes, oh, we need help from the government and the government comes in, oh, they'll help them for sure. And you'll own nothing and they'll be happy and they'll be controlled as cattle to the slaughter. So we have to be totally aware of that. We need to get out of big cities. We need to get into, rural communities and get away from big major highways as they're going to come in with the carbon credit plan right away. We need to be completely prepared and go back to what it means to be human, go back to what it means to be an individual, live by example, live freely, and individual responsibility, freedom, survival are all synonymous with humanity. So we need to understand that. We need to get back to what made us great before that greatness ended up with tyranny and avert convenience, which is collapsing civilization as we speak and making us weak and stupid and essentially crumbling the very fabric of mankind and civilization. So I hope we can all learn a thing or two from that and build from that and be able to grow our own and build our own and fish for ourselves and dig wells and defend ourselves, obviously, with firearms if you can get them, though they're flying off the shelves. And again, that's why heavensharvest.com, there's heirloom seeds and storeable foods that are non-GMO. There's also storeable foods at whamsurvival.com. Go and get those now, my friends. Again, use code WHAM at heavensharvest.com. Get free shipping in the United States. And even if you're not in the US, you should still use code WHAM. There's no reason not to. Anyway, with that said, we also have other affiliates, rncstore.com, Richardson Nutritional Center, your source for Laetrile Online, made famous by G. Edward Griffin's book, World Without Cancer. Get your apricot seeds, Laetrile, amygdalin, and vitamin B17 there. We have Epic Fund Me, where you could donate an Epic Cash, the privacy coin based on the Mimble-Wimble protocol, which is another great way to get around this financial system, this tyranny, this technocracy. Also, check out our Teespring store, which is all linked in the description of this video. We have a Rockfin account, World Alternative Media, where you can find exclusive content including documentaries, etc., Q&As if you send us questions. We are on Telegram, World Alternative Media. We have a Telegram channel, World Alternative Media Announcements. We have our newsletter, www.imband.com. And of course, we're on band.video. So big shout out again to Alex Jones and Michael Zimmerman for making that possible for us to speak the truth and mobilize people out there even further. We're on BitChute, Odyssey, Rumble, and Brighteon at World Alternative Media. We're on Hive, Steemit, and Float.app at Josh Sigurdson. We are on The Bad Guys, TikTok and Instagram, World Alternative Media, Twitter and Getter at World Alt Media. We're on all the major podcast platforms, Spotify, Podbean. Of course, we're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Opera, Safari, etc. Go give us a good rating on there. We're probably not going to be on there forever. I'm shocked we're still on there, honestly, with the things we talk about. But nonetheless, those are places you could find us. Anyways, I appreciate everyone joining us today. We will be getting further into this with a whole bunch of guests coming up in the coming days. I appreciate it, everyone. Stay strong out there and stand strong for your individualism, for your humanity. This is a war on humanity. And the solution, if there's a war on humanity, is to be more human, to be more empathetic, and to be more conscious. Stand up for yourselves. Build your own life. Don't wait for someone to come and save you. I appreciate everyone watching today. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.